Welcome to the debate.
It's good to be here.
Today, we are turning our analytical lens toward the American Mountain West. Specifically, we're focusing on a transaction that might look a little pedestrian to the casual observer. But, well, I think it actually represents a profound philosophical case study in roster construction. The Colorado Rockies have agreed to a one-year, $6 million contract with veteran left-hander Jose Quintana. Now, this move has to be contextualized within the blast radius of a historically calamitous 2025 season.
Calamitous is a polite way of describing a season where a major league franchise lost 119 games. I mean, we are talking about a team that found itself in a statistical abyss. But the question we're debating today isn't about the past, it's about the remediation strategy. Is signing a 37-year-old pitcher like Jose Quintana, a guy whose, velocity metrics are in free fall, is that a prudent stabilization of a rotation in crisis, or is it a fundamental denial of the physics of Coors Field?
That is the core tension, and I view this through the lens of necessary stabilization. The Rockies are not in a position to be picky about high-ceiling talent. They're in a desperate fight for baseline competence. The rotation last year was a revolving door of unprepared arms that resulted in a 6.65 ERA, the highest collective rotation ERA since the stat became official in 1913. So my position is that Quintana represents a rational, logic-driven acquisition to just arrest that slide. He is the adult in the room that this roster frantically needs.
And while I understand the desire for an adult in the room, I worry they've hired a chaperone who can't keep up with the kids. My contention is that while the idea of a veteran stabilizer is sound, the application of that idea using Jose Quintana is a tactical error. We're looking at a specific player profile, low velocity, extremely low strikeout capabilities, that is historically the most vulnerable profile you can possibly place at 5,280 feet. I am just not convinced that veteran savvy can overcome the aerodynamic realities of Denver when you're striking out fewer batters than almost anyone else in professional baseball.
I want to challenge that immediately because I think you're dismissing the value of volatility reduction. We have to start with the baseline of what the Rockies were working with. You mentioned the 119 losses, but let's drill down into the why. The Rockies were forced to throw, untested pitchers, essentially high A and double A caliber arms, into the fire of the major leagues simply to cover innings. That destroys confidence, and it destroys bullpens. The strategy this offseason has been coherent. Spend $19.1 million to acquire 3 veterans, Michael Lorenzen, Tomoyuki Sugano, and now Quintana. This isn't about finding an ace. It's about purchasing functional innings.
Purchasing innings is fine, but purchasing bad innings is just an expensive way to keep losing games. You use the phrase volatility reduction. I would argue Quintana introduces a different kind of volatility, the volatility of the ball in play. We need to look at the metrics here. Last season with Milwaukee, Quintana posted a 6% strikeout rate. That is not just low, it is anemic. It was his lowest rate since his rookie season in 2012.
But he posted a 3.96 ERA. He went 11-7. The results suggest he knows how to navigate that limitation.
He navigated it in Milwaukee, in Pittsburgh, in St. Louis, environments with normal air density. In those parks, a 91-mile-per-hour sinker might induce a ground ball. But let's talk about the physics of Coors Field. The air density in Denver is roughly 80% of sea level. That reduces the drag coefficient on the baseball. So pitchers who rely on movement, specifically the Magnus effect, to create sink or run, they lose a significant percentage of that movement at altitude. Quintana relies entirely on guile and missing the barrel by millimeters. If the air takes away those millimeters, that ground ball becomes a line drive.
I think you're treating the Coors effect as this monolith that destroys all non-power pitchers, but, history suggests otherwise. In fact, some of the most successful pitchers in Rockies history haven't been the 98-mile-per-hour flamethrowers. They've been the guys who can disrupt timing. Quintana is a craftsman. He changes speeds, he locates. He isn't trying to blow the ball past anyone. He's trying to keep them off balance.
Disruption of timing works when you have a margin for error. Quintana has none. His swing and strike rate last year was 6.9%. Among all MLB pitchers with at least 100 innings, that was the second lowest. He essentially relies on the batter to get themselves out. Now place that profile in Coors Field, which has the largest outfield acreage in Major League Baseball. You are asking for a strategy that necessitates the ball being put in play, in a park where in play is a death sentence.
But is it a death sentence, or is it simply a different equation? You mentioned the outfield size. To me, that highlights the need for a pitcher who doesn't walk people. Quintana's walk rate was elite, 3.4 per 9 innings. When you have a massive outfield, the last thing you want is free passes cluttering the bases before a double hits the gap. Quintana forces the action. He makes the batter earn their way on base. The Rockies' issue last year wasn't just hits. It was the inability to throw strikes. They had innings that never ended because pitchers just couldn't find the zone. Quintana finds the zone.
He finds the zone, sure, but does he command the zone? There's a difference. If you're throwing strikes that don't have bite because the spin efficiency is neutralized by the altitude, you're essentially throwing batting practice. And this brings up the concept of BIP, batting average on balls in play. In a normal stadium, BIP stabilizes around .300. In Coors Field, because of those massive gaps you mentioned, BIP is consistently inflated. A pitcher who cannot generate strikeouts is at the mercy of that inflation. You're taking a guy who allows a massive amount of contact and putting him in the one stadium in the world that punishes contact the most severely. That isn't stability, that is a statistical mismatch.
I dispute the idea that he is at the mercy of the hitters. You're looking at a sample size of 1 year of declining metrics and ignoring a decade of high-level problem solving. In his last 100 starts since 2022, Quintana has a 3.53 ERA. That ranks in the top 40 for all pitchers with at least 300 innings. That isn't luck, that is the definition of pitchability. You call it a mismatch, I call it a hedge against the implosion we saw last year. Even if his ERA inflates to 450 or 480 in Coors, that is nearly 2 full runs better than the 6.65 nightmare the rotation posted in 2025.
A 4.80 ERA is certainly better than 6.65. I'll grant you that. But we have to look at the opportunity cost. This roster isn't just a void. There are young players trying to break through. By signing Quintana along with Lorenzen and Sugano, you are creating a logjam.
A logjam is exactly what they need. Paul DePodesta, the president of baseball operations, said it explicitly. You never have enough good pitching. Last year proved that axiom. They ran out of bodies.
But are they the right bodies? Let's look at the youth. The Rockies have Chase Dollander, the 9th overall pick in 2023. They have Ryan Feltner returning. They have Carson Palmquist. But more importantly, look at a guy like Tanner Gordon. In the final months of that disastrous 2025 season, Gordon was arguably their most productive starter. He showed he could handle the environment. So now you bring in Quintana? Are you blocking Tanner Gordon, a pitcher who might actually be part of the next winning Rockies team, to give innings to a 37-year-old on a 1-year deal?
You're not blocking him, you're insulating him. This is the human shield aspect of the strategy. The worst thing you can do for a prospect like Chase Dollander or even Tanner Gordon is to force them to carry the rotation before they are fully developed. If Dollander needs another month in AAA, Albuquerque to refine his changeup, having Quintana allows that to happen. If Feltner's shoulder flares up, which, happens with pitchers returning from injury, you aren't scrambling to call up some kid from AA who isn't ready. Quintana absorbs the difficulty so the kids don't have to.
That sounds noble, but in practice, it often leads to mediocrity blocking potential. Antonio Sensatella is also back, trying to revive his career at 31. Kyle Freeland is there. The rotation is suddenly crowded with injury risks and rebound candidates. If Quintana goes out and gets shelled, which, given the physics we discussed, is a high probability, are you sticking with him because he's the veteran presence, while a guy like Gordon sits in AAA wasting bullets?
You don't stick with him if he gets shelled. That's the beauty of the 1-year, $6 million deal. It's low leverage. If he fails, you cut him. But if he succeeds, you've protected your assets. And I think you're underestimating the mentorship component. Dollander and these young guys need to see how a professional prepares.
Mentorship is valuable, but you can hire a pitching coach for a lot less than $6 million if you want advice. You pay a starter to get out. And I want to touch on that preparation aspect. The Rockies are pushing this new cultural narrative under manager Warren Schaefer about being grinders.
It is more than just a narrative. It's an operational shift. They're moving away from the old school approach of, mass repetitions and ground balls
and focusing heavily on physiological recovery. Schaefer has been very vocal about valuing sleep, nutrition, and efficiency to combat the unique fatigue of playing at altitude.
And that sounds very progressive and scientific.
It is, and Quintana fits that mold perfectly. He's played for 8 teams, he knows his body, he knows how to manage a 162-game season, he is not a 22-year-old staying up all night playing video games. He brings a level of professional rigor that fits this specific cultural pivot.
I just struggle to see how valuing sleep counteracts the aging curve. You can be the most well-rested 37-year-old in history, but your spinal column and your rotator cuffs still have 37 years of wear and tear on them. And nowhere accelerates that wear and tear like Colorado. The recovery at altitude is scientifically slower. The oxygen deprivation affects muscle repair. Look at Chris Bryant.
That is an unfair comparison. Bryant has a chronic degenerative condition.
But it's the same environment. Bryant is back on the 60-day IL with back issues, rehabbing in Las Vegas because he seemingly cannot get healthy in Denver. Now you're asking Quintana, who threw 131 innings last year, to come into this environment that eats veteran bodies alive. It feels like we're ignoring the medical reality of the venue.
I would argue Quintana's durability is his defining trait. He's been a workhorse his entire career. He doesn't rely on max effort on every pitch, which actually might make him more suited to survive the altitude than a power pitcher who torques his back on every slider. He creates outs through manipulation, not explosion. That's a sustainable model.
Sustainable until the ball stops breaking. I want to circle back to the defensive impact, because this is where the floor raiser argument crumbles for me. You mentioned the trauma of the 119-loss season. One of the most demoralizing things for a baseball team is playing behind a pitcher who cannot get a swing and a miss.
I disagree. The most demoralizing thing is playing behind a pitcher who walks the bases loaded.
But consider the length of the innings. If Quintana is pitching and the ball is constantly in play, foul balls, singles, doubles, those innings drag on. We're talking about 25-minute half innings, where the defense is on its heels. In the thin air, that is physically exhausting for the fielders. A high strikeout pitcher gets you off the field. A pitch-to-contact guy like Quintana, in a park where contact equals chaos, keeps the defense out there. It taxes the bullpen because his pitch count rises, not from strikeouts, but from sheer volume of interaction.
But the data shows he is efficient. He doesn't waste pitches, and frankly, the Rockies' defense needs to be tested. They need to be engaged. I would much rather have a defense that is active than one that's asleep because the pitcher walked 3 guys and then gave up a grand slam. Quintana keeps the game moving. He keeps the team in the game. Even if he gives up 3 runs in 6 innings, that's a quality start. That gives the offense a chance to win. Last year, the game was often over by the 2nd inning.
A quality start is a statistical designation. In Coors, 3 runs in 6 innings is fine. But my fear is that with a 6% strikeout rate, we aren't looking at 3 runs. We're looking at a cascade of balls in play that turned into 5 or 6 runs before you can even get the bullpen up. And then you're right back where you started, overworking the relief corps and demoralizing the offense.
And that is the gamble. But it's $6 million, it's a gamble with almost zero downside. If you're right, and statistics make him unplayable, he's released in May, and Tanner Gordon takes the spot. The financial risk is negligible, but the upside, getting 150 innings of competent, professional baseball, is massive for a team that had none of that last year.
I'll concede the financial point. In an era where a 4th starter costs $12 million, getting Quintana for $6 million is efficient asset management. But efficiency doesn't always equal effectiveness. My concern remains that the Rockies are trying to solve a 2026 problem with a 2015 solution. They're betting that guile is a transferable skill to altitude.
And I'm betting that competence is a transferable skill. The Rockies saw the abyss in 2025. You cannot simply hope your way out of 119 losses. You have to build a floor. Quintana is the concrete in that foundation. He allows the organization to breathe, to develop Dollander and Feltner properly, and to field a team that looks like a major league squad every night.
We can agree that looking like a major league squad is the minimum requirement. I just worry that the specific tool they've chosen, a low-velocity, contact-dependent lefty, is the wrong implement for the job. The history of Coors Field is littered with veterans who came in confident and left with their ERA in the stratosphere because they couldn't miss a bat.
It is certainly a fascinating experiment. Paul DePasta and Josh Burns are wagering that professionalism can mitigate the Coors effect.
And we will be watching the radar gun and the strikeout totals very closely to see if they are right.
Indeed. As the spring training gates open at Salt River Fields, the rotation competition will be the primary storyline. Thank you for joining us on this edition of The Debate.
Until next time.